So next up we have Steve McDaniels and Justin Schwartz.
I appreciate that. Senator Kavanaugh and members of the Senate and staff, of course. My name is Steve McDaniel, and on behalf of the entire New York State Codes Coalition, we feel that our organizations need to play a critical role in the overhaul of code enforcement in the state of New York. I have read your August 5th, 2019 report in its entirety, and I applaud you in your attempts to address code enforcement in the state. It is needed. We feel the same as you. An overhaul and change is needed, and I further encourage you to not stop. I would like to take this opportunity to say that you are correct in stating that the lack of code enforcement in New York State is not a priority. It's not. The foundation of code enforcement begins exactly with what you state in your report, that code enforcement must be a priority. The priority needs to be at all levels, state, county, local governments, and the justice system. If you had expanded your investigation to a true representation across the state of New York, you would have come to the conclusion that starting with the justice system alone would do more for code enforcement than any of the pieces of legislation here today. Requiring judges and justices to treat code violations in the same manner as any other crime, to issue proper fines and judgments and do so in a timely manner, will begin to change the poor culture that code enforcement has experienced. This will send a strong message to the violators, which in turn gains voluntary compliance sooner. And when a violation notice is issued, those violators will begin to listen. So when we discuss and look at these bills under consideration today, I urge you to keep these two questions in mind. Can you accomplish this if the municipality does not have the proper staff to do so? And secondly, will this be effective if the judges, justices, and courts ignore them? If you answer no to either one of these foundational questions, then the bills needs to be put aside or withdrawn until we can address staffing in the justice system. Otherwise, we've done nothing but make ourselves feel good by putting it into law because of the law says so concept. We wrote it, it's there, but nobody enforces it.
Yeah, so why don't we let Mr. Schwartz go, and then we'll do both of you. Yeah, that's great.
Okay. I want to thank you all. The only motivation I'm testifying before this committee on behalf of the Rockland County Legal Housing and Legal Private School Task Force is never to have another Black Sunday that claimed the lives of 3 New York City firefighters seriously injured, 4 others, and 2 of them hailed from Rockland County. Today is the 15th anniversary of Black Sunday. It was the deadliest day for the FDNY since the World Trade Center attack on September 11, 2001. And particularly shocking since two different deadly fires occurred on the same day. The Bronx fire started on the 3rd floor of a tenement of the East 178th Street, the Grand Concourse, and may have been caused by an extension cord to a portable heating setting fire to a mattress. 3 alarms were called: Engine Company 42, Ladder Company 33, Ladder Company 27, and Rescue Company 3 were involved in the fighting the fire. The alarm call was made at 7:59 on a cold, windy morning, the day after a blizzard and snow hampered the engines in reaching the address. The closest hydrant was frozen, and some of those hoses were either frozen or cracked. The apartments have been illegally subdivided using drywall partitions. 6 firefighters on the 4th floor were trapped when the fire flashed through the door of the apartment, unable to find their way to the fire escape, and decided to jump from the windows. 2 were killed in the fall: John G. Bellew, Lieutenant Curtis Myron, who was in command of Ladder 27. The other 4, Brendan Cawley, Jeff Kuhl, Joe DiBernardo, Gene Stolowski, were severely injured and disabled and had to retire. Unfortunately, DiBernardo, he died 6 years later, and he had been promoted to lieutenant May 2005 posthumously. Jeff Kuhl survived the 4-story fall on that January from a burning Bronx building with illegal rooms. The former hockey player broke 13 ribs, both soldiers, his pelvis, in 4 places, cracked bones in his spine, neck, fractured his skull in 2 spots. He spent nearly 3 weeks in a coma. He lost 72 units of blood. His body was put back together, as he says, with crazy glue and duct tape, and lived with survivor's guilt, post-traumatic stress. And Jeff can't walk well, and arthritis is taking over his shoulders and wrists. We call him in Rockland a miracle man. What's the reasons for this? The unlawful dissecting a home boils down to one factor. That's greed and money. These landlords buy cheap properties, hire contractors, mostly unlicensed, willing to subdivide illegally. The small rooms are rented to the tenants, many of them immigrants, for about $500. That's cash. No checks, cash. The electrical and piping work is often haphazardly done, and the homes frequently lack the smoke and carbon monoxide detectors required by law. In one Spring Valley abode, 28 people were living in a single house. The landlord was collecting about $160,000 cash, tax-free. In North Park, Stony Point, fire authorities discovered a garage converted into many tiny living quarters. Town of Ramapo in the village of Spring Valley, the high-density sprawl, which you have said in your report, the community is leading a housing availability crisis. Unfortunately, the weapons of mass construction and its unchecked expansion has led to the dubious building and construction practices, including converting single and 2-family homes into multiple dwelling units without the requisite permits and site plans. A number of private schools known as yeshivas, which were often located in a trailer or a room within a home that is designated as a single family, but was subsequently converted into a multi-family property. The severe lack of available space for suitable housing, schools, and synagogues, combined with an ineffective code enforcement, resulted in a continuing development chaos. The Rockland County Illegal Housing Task Force testifies to you today that Ramapo is not meeting its responsibility of protecting its residents and first responders. They're just not. From the dangers imposed by the improper constructions, unlicensed contractors, and the seeking of forgiveness and the permission attitude. The current state of mistrust, and along with the history of corruption, the culture of noncompliance that plagues the town of Ramapo is now infecting, since your report, the town's surrounding villages, Spring Valley, Pomona, Chestnut Ridge, Air Mile, Kaiser, New Square, and it's still widening the continuing development chaos. Rockland Fire Services said enough. Your bills, we all support them, every single one of them. However, you have current law, so I was asked this committee should demand the Department of State Building and Codes to give the authority, which they do have now, give it to the County of Rockland, the county executive, to enforce the building and codes instead of the town of Ramapo. Why? Because they have their own arbitrary judges. They don't fall to the whims of an elected official. The committee should demand to have the second floor, Governor Cuomo, take the handcuffs off the state department heads and staff to do their jobs. They supposedly have been trained, hired to do without the political and bureaucratic interference. In Yiddish, we call it bullshit. This committee should demand equal enforcement to all, not to some builders and developers. Respectfully submitted.
thank you both for your testimony, and I do want to point out, I've gotten to work with Mr. Schwartz for some time now, and he and the group that he works with have poured an enormous amount of energy and time and resources into bringing light to this issue in Rockland County. And, I'm sure my colleagues recognize the passion from which you speak. And you didn't mention it, but I will, that you're also a firefighter yourself.
Life member Spring Valley, 42 years.
And thank you for all of that. Now, you did speak to two other sort of primary concerns that you represent in your testimony. That's understaffing and the courts, and you suggested that those are two places that we can perhaps focus our efforts on. And I would just point out that, in fact, many of these bills actually do address those two key elements. One, for example, directs the state to consider what I'll call staffing ratios for code enforcement officials. During our investigation, we found out that Mount Vernon, a city of nearly 70,000 people, at the time of the investigation had one single official enforcing code, which, I don't need to tell you, puts every single resident of that city in danger, not to mention the first responders and other stakeholders. And so when you talk about staffing, we recognize that's a major issue and are attempting to address that. And on the court side, there are a number of bills here actually that address the judicial proceedings, which we found entirely problematic when it came to code enforcement. Most notably, in my opinion, is the fact that you'd have these open code violations for many months, sometimes years. And at the end of that proceeding, when the case is closed for one reason or another, there is a $250 penalty levied against the property owner. And so I believe, and this has nothing to do with resources from the state, this is a matter of trying to get problems fixed for the safety and betterment of the residents, the tenants, whoever are living in that building, not to mention the property values of that neighborhood and the quality of life issues that come from code violations. Core bill in this package is not just setting maximum penalties, as have been in the law for quite some time, but finally putting in place minimum penalties for code violations, so that we don't have that situation where there's a code violation open for 2 years and there's a $200 fine at the end of it. This will, I believe, and most of us believe, compel a far more expeditious handling of these code violations by the property owners who are in violation. There's also another bill that tries to address the very lengthy proceedings that happen in Supreme Court with condemnations and move some of those proceedings into county courts, city courts, that again can move more expeditiously or not as onerous to municipalities. And so your message is well received, but for anyone who's listening and watching, and also perhaps for yourself, I did want to point out that we fully recognize that those are key challenges, and we actually have put together some effort here to address some of those key challenges. But certainly, I think I can speak for both of the committees. We look forward to refining some of these bills if we need to, in collaboration with you and your group, and that's why we're doing this, right? Oftentimes these packages aren't accompanied by hearings. We felt it was important, and Senator Kavanaugh strongly felt it was important that we hear from stakeholders before taking up these bills, and that's what we're doing here. And so I just wanted to make those few comments. You're certainly welcome to respond if you like, but I do want to especially thank you for being here.
Sure, absolutely. And Senator Skoufis, we did take a look at all of these. So when we submit our written testimony, you can get more of the details that we talked about. And I do understand that some of them do have some increased penalties, but keep in mind that when you make changes to Article 18 of the executive law, where that law happens to be a law that mandates a municipality create a law. So just because you put the minimum fines in there, the judges aren't listening to them now. So just increasing the fine, we could set it to $10,000, $20,000, $1 million, life in prison. It may not necessarily matter until the message gets to the judicial system. And I guess that's where I was heading with that message. It wasn't that you weren't making an attempt. We admire the attempt. This is the first time since the early 80s that any Senate has taken that. So you are creating history here today. So I sincerely appreciate that.
Senator May.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a few questions for you, Mr. Daniels, also about the judicial side of things. Do you think sort of bypassing the judges and using administrative adjudication is more effective and should be expanded? I gather both of you would say yes.
You're definitely heading in the right direction. Absolutely. Okay. I mean, you do it on an administrative level, you can get things handled a lot faster. You can get the fines. You can send the message to the people that you're trying to send that message to. When it's that elected judge or official that's sitting the bench and they don't have, it doesn't matter if the minimums are set at 1,000 or 7,500 or whether it's a second or third violation. Administratively may not be a bad way to go, and we would definitely support that.
And how do you feel about tacking the fines onto property taxes as a way of collecting the fines?
There are municipalities that do that right now, and it is a successful process. Absolutely. We would be in support of that.
Let the record show thumbs up from Mr. Schwartz on both of these
Absolutely.
as well.
We do that right now in Rockland County. You mentioned the Rockland County Housing Initiative. That started, just to tell you about the fines, because they used the administrative judge. It went from a 3-department now to a 10-department. The message is getting there. And the fines went from 5,000 now to 10,000. And then it doubles. So they're getting the message. We just now initiated with the consumer protection, which the county never had, and as an enforcement. And we started now with a 1-man shop. We're now at a 2-man shop. And their message is getting out to get out of all the other unlicensed contractors that are coming in. So it does help. Administrative law judges, if we could have our own housing court, that would be even better. Take it out of the towns, take it out of the municipalities, give it to the county, and let the county do it. Or put it into some type of where they don't have it. The most frustrating part is that we have people that are paid to do their job and they're not doing it. They're handcuffed here from the state, from the second floor in some part of this building or the other buildings, and they're not able to do their jobs. It's a shame.
And then just one other question about allowing tenants to sue proactively their landlords for poor housing conditions. Is that something that you support as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they're taking advantage. You come down and you see what they have done. Destroyed neighborhoods. I mean, at the same time you're doing this, we're having a hearing because of all the so-called, hate, the distrust and mistrust when you have a certain community that's getting everything. I mean, I find it fascinating. You try to get the New York State Tax Department to look into what can we do with the cash receipts? They don't want to be bothered. You try to get an appointment with the Attorney General to come down, hasn't responded. But you get a machete type of act in a certain part of the community, and guess what? Everybody's here. So you talk about those who have and those who don't. So who you're going to go with? So that's I'm not, there's one thing you'll see. I tell it straight it is. I don't go into the politics, but it's a lot of bureaucratic nonsense and people's lives are at stake. And I will tell you that if anyone dies on our watch, you're not going to be able to stop. And that's the problem. You can have as much as Sarah Wallace reports and everything else. They're not doing it. And your grandfather was the best senator that I ever known and wouldn't stand for it. That I'll tell you in the Bronx.
That's excluding Senator Skoufis, right?
Yes. That's a different generation.
Did you have
No,
further?
that's it, thanks.
Senator Biasi, did you have
Thank
further?
you. Thank you very much for saying that. And I have the same intolerance for injustice and agree with absolutely everything that both of you said, and especially your sentiment about people not being able to do their jobs or positions not being filled. It's inadequate government, and most New Yorkers have no idea what's even going on. And I think that's why we're here today. And I'm 100% committed to transparency and to holding people accountable.
So tell the governor to take the handcuffs of the building
I'd
and
be
State
happy to do
Department.
that right now. So someone pick up the phone happily. I will. I'm committed to
Give
that.
it to the Office of Fire and Prevention. Take it out of this building codes because they're corrupt.
There's
Erica
lots of
Creed in
corruption
particular.
everywhere. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, my question is more of a hypothetical, and also if this is something that already happens, then please excuse my ignorance. I just don't know. But as you were talking, it feels like the landscape of code enforcement, it falls mainly on municipalities, of course, that's the reality, but the landlord is not really held accountable in the sense that if they are providing housing for someone, are they required to certify that to anybody at any time, yearly, biannually, whatever, the beginning of when they're gonna provide housing, that the housing that they are providing is actually compliant with the building codes? Do you think that is something that we should require? And what would that look like from landlords or from property owners who I could imagine would be really not pleased with that
So,
type of regulation?
If I can jump in, because he'll give you the other side, I'll give you my side.
Okay.
I can tell you, most of the buildings that are in the current court system right now in the town of Ramapo, most of their violations are no C of Os. We want that rental registry to have that proof. I got inspectors that are not doing their jobs, and there are buildings. The community center that I live in, my over 55, I am still waiting. We've been there since 2007. No CO in the building and no certificate, no fire certificate that we meet all the requirements. Still waiting for that. And it's 3 years into it, and I'm a firefighter. The second part is,
Can I pause on that? Why are you waiting 3 years? What is the reason? I mean, what's the real reason?
competence.
Yeah, okay.
And then the developer has money. They don't want to rock the boat.
Got it. It's public financing, but we're not at that.
No, but you don't have to pull the
hearing,
financing, but take it out so you can go. Where am I going to take it to? So if I
Yeah.
go ahead and take it to the town of Ramapo, and which, by the way, which if you allow, I can't even go now to zoning planning board hearings in the village of Spring Valley or in the town of Ramapo. I can't speak because I'll be arrested as a public nuisance, because that's how passionate I get. So the issue becomes that you need to be able to take it out, give it to the people that will do the jobs. Your bureaucrats up here ain't doing their jobs. They're not. And they're
Yeah.
gonna kill people, and they're gonna have blood on their hands.
They already have. Well,
Yes.
that has been the result of inaction.
Right.
Yes.
But Senator Biagi, again,
Yeah,
and I'm not sure it's necessarily the other side. I think we're on the same side.
Okay.
The landlords aren't necessary, to answer your question, the landlords are not necessarily held accountable. There isn't one standard that says they shall be. We have the building codes that imply, we enforce them, they should be, but not every time that the unit is rented out or leased out, there isn't. a
Isn't that
requirement.
unusual? Because in almost every other capacity, I mean, I'm also an attorney. If I went into court without my license renewed, I would be sanctioned, right? There are real consequences to not actually following the law, but in this instance, there's a gap. Yes.
There's absolutely.
Massive gap.
Absolutely. a gap,
Massive
yes,
gap.
you would find in the uniform code.
And then you're opening up a whole new Pandora's box with Section 8 housing. Don't even go there. Don't even go there.
What if it just applied to private landlords to begin?
Well, what you have done here is at least we can go after them because they were hiding under the LLC. So if it's a
Right.
new LLC, we have traction now to get them.
Yeah.
And that is because of what you guys are doing.
Sure.
And so that's there.
And to me, at your level, it wouldn't matter whether they were public or not public or
Correct.
private.
Why?
They all should be treated the same. Those residents
I
should be
agree with
afforded the
that.
same.
I agree with that, and I also just from the realities of my first year here know that sometimes it takes some easing into things. So that's why I asked which order would matter if it did at all. Okay.
So the other person, so hopefully you'll hear from our legislative member of our task force as well as a 16 county member of legislation here, Mr. Hartwick, because he's going to gear up and he can address a lot more into the bills. But you're doing a phenomenal job. I'll just repeat it one more time. Take the handcuffs off and leave us alone. Give it to the county executive. We can get it done. And you know how it pays for it? So pays for it with the fines.
Yep.
We take the property, we confiscate the cars, everything. I don't need you to fund it. We can fund it. Let the bad people do it.
Yeah.
I don't need your funds.
Thank you very much.
Just one more question. We talked about other potential forums to adjudicate these things, kind of administrative forms. But to the extent you both made the point that the courts aren't necessarily taking these things as seriously as you think they ought to.
They're not.
Is there any? I mean, it's hard to legislate. It's hard to pass all. We're legislators. We pass laws, but we also have oversight responsibilities and the ability to speak publicly about issues. But do you have any specific? I mean, it's very hard to pass a law that says judges shall take such and such more seriously. Is there any suggestions on how to alter the culture of the judiciary on this
Put them
issue?
into administrative judges, have housing courts, and make it the way Rockland County, you come down, I mean, you have even acknowledged how the RCI does it, the Codes Initiative, and guess what? They have an administrative judge. And all his job is to make sure they get the fines. That's it. And as long as he judged fairly, but he isn't politically put there. So he doesn't have to answer to the constituency, because that's even worse. You can go into a court and you can see certain people, they'll get a low fine. If you get to another part, they're gonna get nailed. And it's not equal. It's not equal justice for all. It's not, it's a shame. It should be a court. It should never have been allowed to be in there. I mean, it's common sense, because all they're looking for, as you heard from the Attorney General, we only want compliance. Damn the compliance. I want them to be held accountable, and there's a price to pay. Because who are they taking advantage? They're taking advantage of two people. One is the tenants in there, and they're absolutely right. And then once you do the fines, that's exactly they'll fear. And that's one of the things that we have to balance when we go in. But damn it, because the firefighters are fighting it and going into what will be an SRO or an illegal wall, similar to what happened on that Black Sunday. We're putting our lives on it. That's what we volunteer for. No difference than the FDNY or whatever one's paid or not. We still got the same stuff. And that's what we go into and go for. And the code enforcement officers, most of them, I would say 95, want to do their jobs. But the political hacks that are on top of them say, look the other way. I am still waiting. You had it in your report. 201. It's 201 Route 306, 261 Route 306, 265 306, 267 Route 306. Today is January 23rd, 2020. January 4th in 2019, there was a Supreme Court of Rockland County to get an eviction order to evict the building. Nothing has been done.
Good.